make it go live, which is rather odd. I have no button, and it shouldn't need a button. It should just be there automatically. So it's a bit frustrating.
Yeah.
Oh, video. Uh, Very peculiar. Very peculiar. Hmm. All right, there's something happening. Ah, so the key on this idea is absolutely to make sure that it is adopted purely as a what if, as a hypothetical. That's it. It's a speculation. But you got to go into it really and give it uh, a full go, and treat it, as if it is real, even though it might not be. It doesn't matter. So we are suspending all doubts and questions. We're just saying, okay, now let's say, what if I chose the circumstances of my birth? So let me assume that I did. All right. So I take this for granted that I did. And what's the good reason for it? Why? Why did I choose the parents, circumstances? Why does this matter? And now we get to see something really profound. So before I share my story, Daniela, let me ask you, if you look at your own birth this way, let's just start with, why did you choose your particular parents? What was the good reason for it, or what possibly could have been the good reason for it, do you think?
Yes, yes. For me, that
Why
answer is
them?
simple. Actually, I didn't look it like this from the beginning. Of course, I would like to state that. I mean, it wasn't an idea that I was born with, or that somebody educated me to.
Right, right.
It really made sense to me in that period of my life when I was really learning how to take care of myself, loving myself, contemplating on everything that my life was trying to tell me, healing myself, and so on and so forth. And in that process, somehow, so of course, I can't really prove it, right? It's not something that can be scientifically measured, actually, but if I am to choose a few key moments, I would say that, and it's not only about my parents, it's also about my family, some other relatives that I was really close with, right?
Wow.
And I've seen throughout my entire life, I've seen this pattern of putting others in front of our own needs, of always saying my needs do not matter. I don't matter. It's always the needs and the desires of other people, right? And at some point, I, and I didn't have this kind of education as clear examples in my family of people that are really loving themselves, that are taking care of themselves, that are nurturing themselves, that are trusting themselves, right? But somehow I started to do that by myself, in contrast actually to what I was seeing. Right, kids are doing that. They are following the behaviors of their parents, or they are, or on the contrary, they are saying, I'll never be like my dad, or I'll never be like my mother, and I'm doing the opposite, right? So yeah, many of us are doing that. But the
so
key.
how did the circumstances specifically result in self-love? That's unusual.
Well, is it? I find it to be quite quite usual, actually, and I can see it around my friends, the people I work with, and so on and so forth. So not only in my family, but it goes back to being able to love ourselves in order to being able to love others. If we want to make something out of our lives, if we want to see life out of this suffering pattern that humanity is kind of used with it, right? It always comes back to this, to being able to love ourselves, and this is actually a skill. I mean, we are born with it. We are love. We are pure love. From a spiritual point of view, we know that. I mean, the kids coming into this world, they want to come into this world, right? But somehow down the line, we kind of lose this perspective. And at some point, we need to make a choice, or at least that was the choice that I had to make. If I'm going to continue hurting myself, or if I'm going to learn how actually to take care of myself. And hurt and suffering comes in so many forms. I mean, you don't need to physically hurt yourself. You don't need to emotionally or mentally hurt yourself. But not taking care of your basic needs, of your soul needs or emotional needs, it means that you are not at that particular level, meeting your potential level, right? So that would mean for me to truly love yourself, to follow your path, the path of your soul, to search for that well-being in your life, and to cultivate those skills that make you whole once again, right?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if I responded entirely to your question. To summarize, yes, this is self-love. How we cultivate self-love and well-being is something that I've learned specifically because I was born in the family that I choose to be born.
Yeah, so how did they leverage this or bring this idea of self-love specifically to the front, to the fore for you? How did your family
Well,
circumstances, connect you to self-love?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you
All right,
perhaps
so
rephrase that a bit?
like if you're born in my family, self-love was just not an issue there. It was not a concept. It was never even mentioned, never thought about, never talked about, and didn't really exist.
Yeah, it's the same for my family. I mean, they were never educated uh, for having this particular perspective on life and for themselves, right?
Hmm.
It's not like they didn't want to love themselves more, or it's not like they didn't want to suffer less, or it's not like they didn't wanted to be happy or thriving in their lives or looking for well-being practices and so on and so forth. But if you are not educated, if you don't have people around you that are telling you there is another way of doing things, of living your life, and so on and so forth, you might just live your entire life in that perspective that, I don't know, suffering is normal.
Yeah.
You don't think of suffering, you don't think of well-being. It is what it is, and it's normal like that. I mean, it's something, it's not a common subject in my family. It's something that I had to learn that it was missing, actually. So something was missing from
So
this
how
entire
did you?
dynamic, family dynamic.
Right. So, I mean, we're saying that the circumstances of our birth, that we choose them because of a reason. And the good reason in your case is because those circumstances led you to self-love. I'm keen to know exactly how the circumstances got you to be thinking about self-love, got you to be interested in it.
Yes,
Got
but
you to be
I
involved.
don't want to talk about those specific circumstances. I don't feel
I see. Okay, all right. Fair enough then. All right. Oh, that's why,
so. It's not a
otherwise,
therapy session, and
I see. Okay, okay. There's not even one or two things you can mention that aren't sensitive. Nothing.
um, I would mention the essential, and the essential is not something that I want to share with the entire world,
All right.
specifically because we
All
are
right.
putting
All right.
this
Never mind.
on
Yeah.
Facebook.
All right. All right. Never
Right?
mind. I didn't know it was sensitive for you. All right. I wouldn't have asked otherwise. Sorry. All right. No, no worries. I understand. This
It's not
is, but it's
sensitive;
good
it's
that it
just
comes up.
important.
It's good that it comes up because it is a very sensitive topic. So it's all good. And that's the magic. That's the magic of it. Because it's usually so sensitive, it's very intimate and very, very particular, usually. There's an exquisite exactness to it that is too incredible. It's quite fascinating. And as good reasons. It's too fantastic. It's really amazing. All right. So I'll use my own example here then. So in my case, I was my parents are both basically they were early yuppies. They were yuppies before yuppies became yuppies, right? Successful or on the path to being successful. I guess by that time, already more or less successful. Um, and I'll go into more about the place, but both of them were intelligent people, but silly. I don't know if that makes sense, but for instance, they were so consumed, they had the ability to be sensible, but they weren't. They were very unsensible and foolish because they were absolutely consumed by ego and ambition and status. So, maintaining appearances, for instance, this was very important. Doing things because it would elevate you in the eyes of others. This was their life, right? And it makes you very foolish and very stupid. Like I remember my father, we were in a small town, very small town in the middle of nowhere, and he's a doctor. And of course, in a small town like that, it's very isolated as well. I think probably maybe only 5,000 people, something like that. And the whole district, he was actually the only doctor in the whole district. So this was a big deal. I mean, he's the second to God in that community. He's just the be all and end all of everything, which suited his megalomania no end. So and it's actually one of the reasons why he chose to be there specifically. So I remember it was in the very early days of when we got there, telephones were just new still. So I know this dates me a little bit, but well, okay, this was the thing. so so um, so when we got the telephone, he had our phone number was 8. Can you believe that? 1-digit phone number 8, which means there were less than 10 phones at the time in the town. But also our street number was 8, and where he had his surgery was 88, right? So and then on the cars, the numbers were also 88 or 888, the license plates of his car and my mother's car. And he thought this was the biggest one, most wonderful thing under the sun. And he specifically came to point it out to us children. So, of course, as kids, wow, it's cool. But I thought, yeah, it's cool, but it's also, your amount of pride in it and thinking it is the be all and end all thing in the world. It's kind of childish and, it's a bit feeble and silly. So he made a lot of effort to get this done, right? Obviously using his influence to get this all set up. So it's just an example of that silliness. And, he would regularly do things that made him look good and to the neglect of his children, for instance. He couldn't get two hoots about the children as long as he looked good and looked sensible. So this corruption, this difference between actually being intelligent and acting sensibly, and that was a big gap, and as a little kid, one of my earliest memories, I said, I don't want to be that way. I wanted nothing to do with them. So they put me off that whole ego and status and ambition. They put me off that entirely because they were so corrupted by it and they couldn't see it, and then they were quite miserable in their own way. My father, not so much as my mother. My mother just loved, I don't know if she ever really was happy very often. He at least could enjoy himself and had fun because he was completely consumed in his own narcissism and ego and megalomania. So, but still, which made him, of course, massively inconsiderate and disproportionate. But he'd also do foolish things from a business point of view. He would spend money in peculiar ways that satisfied his vanity, which actually were very costly for him from a actually investment point of view, or just as sensible spending of money. I don't know, people who have narcissists in their or no real deep narcissism, they see this very often. I mean, like he would absolutely not want to spend money on the kids, but was quite happy to buy himself a fancy car or whatever the case may be. So that kind of a discrepancy, it's a very peculiar thing. So anyway, the end result is, for me, it really made me acutely aware, I mean, as my very earliest memory, of the downsides of ego and status and ambition, etc., right? Narcissism, in other words. So it really put me off that whole way of being. And I made every effort to not interact with my parents. I stayed away from them. And my father, luckily, he was kind of a workaholic. It's a very big deal for him. So he wasn't around very often. We saw him once a day, maybe in the evenings. That was it. We didn't see him in the morning. So he was already gone by the time we went up. So, or we went to school before he got up. But I think he was gone before we got up. And then a little bit in the evenings, and that was it, which was great for us, or at least for me, I thought it was great. And then with my mother. So this is this peculiarity of being intelligent, but being silly. I mean, intelligent in the sense that she can understand what's thinking. She can figure stuff out. She's not helpless in doing stuff and, knows how to do whatever she needs to do and so on. Right. So, and she's obviously literate and so on and so forth. By any normal means of intelligence, she's intelligent, but still utterly silly. It's fascinating. And I'll give you a great example. Right. So after school, in the afternoons or on the weekends, if you were near her, she would find you some sort of a chore to do. That's it. Perpetually. Never, no break in it, no nothing. Just if she saw you, oh, go do this, go do that. Because in her mind, this is what she should do as a parent. That was her conception of parenting, was telling your kids what to do and finding them chores to do. It's fascinating. And I saw this pressure of should on her. But yet, if you weren't in her presence, like for instance, I started going outside and spent as much time as I possibly could outside in the yard. Luckily, the house had a big yard. Well, I could go outside the yard too. Didn't matter. I was completely unsupervised if I was outside. I don't have one single memory of my mother being outside in where we were playing. So anyway, okay, now you're outside, and in my logical mind, I figured, well, okay, we're playing outside the whole day, and we came back right before supper time. I imagined I'd have this whole long list of chores that would be added up for me to do, right? Because I've avoided them. Nope, not a single one that she said, do this, do that. No, nothing. It's like, what? This is pretty cool. All I had to do to avoid doing all these stupid, unnecessary, idiotic chores, and they really were idiotic stuff. I mean, we actually had servants at the time, so it wasn't like it was needed for me to do. All I had to do was not be there, just be somewhere else. Wow, this is pretty brilliant. So as a result, I spent every single waking moment outside that I possibly could, never spent it indoors. And in winter, I would hide inside the house. I made myself little forts and found all these fantastic little places to hide. And I was thrilled to be there. I was very happy being on my own. And that's another magical reason. Not only did I unhook from ego and status at a very young age, because that's a big societal pressure. You know, I had an aversion to it, which is very powerful. It's very useful to me. It also forced me to learn to be independent, to be on my own, and to absolutely have no problem being on my own. I love being on my own. I did whatever I did. I had no problems there. So just those two reasons are enough for me to choose that particular family. Now, also the fact that we were in that little town was also profound, because the culture, the society is very religious. The church dominated the town, and just the culture in general, but particularly in that town. I mean, the culture is basically one step away from like an Amish culture, except they don't wear the uniforms, you know, or the dress code. So, and you know, they will drive cars and stuff like that. But in terms of the underlying religious mindset, you know, very, very sober, very humble. You know, don't set yourself apart and all this stuff. And in that culture, I really got an opportunity to really see it kind of as an outsider, because of my ability to be on my own. You automatically start looking at things from an observation overview perspective. So I really got to see that mindset and that psychology deeply. I mean, I was only there till I was 9 years old, but the education that I received was unbelievable. I mean, really, really fantastic. So it was really valuable being in that, to see the detriments of inappropriate application of goodness. That was the profound concept that I saw then. I didn't have the words for it then, but I saw these earnest good people trying their best and their hardest to be good, but failing miserably, right? And I also saw inadvertent hypocrisy. It ate those poor people up, because they did all the things that they were supposed to do and should do, and they were obedient, but privately they had doubts, and they couldn't express those doubts. So they knew they were acting in some way against what they thought was right and good, but they did it anyway. It was something to observe. It was something to observe. So, I mean, just in those few things already, it was massive. And then I had, with my siblings, I had brother and a sister, 4 and 5 years older, and then one about a year and a half younger than me. And then later I had one that was 11 years younger than me. So all of that. But, you know, if I just take the circumstances, that's what I kind of knew at the time, you know, likely to be. Maybe you can't say for sure, but at least, you know, that having the older brother and sister was very interesting, because it took the focus off me. I was actually always the forgotten child. That's it. You know, when it came to bath time, for instance, well, my brother and my sister, they went in first because they were the oldest. And then my younger sister, because she's the baby, got preference over me. So I always had lukewarm water to bath in. Oh, anyway, so. but still, it gave me that anonymity, which was really excellent. And this is something that I truly feel, and it's a peculiar perspective that came to me. We're a little older, but it just came to me. I said, just thinking about things, and it just came out of nowhere. I said, true power lies in anonymity. And because I was observing people who want status, who want power, who want influence. And I figured, you're not really getting it, because you always have all the detriments to it. So the true power, and I was able to be anonymous. I always, not that I was that as a child, but it's not anonymous as if I was invisible. Everybody knew who I was because of my father and my family. But still, you didn't stand out in a way that caused you trouble. And I was able to blend perfectly. Because if you're too anonymous, then you also stand out. You know what I mean? If you make yourself invisible, you also stand out. So you have to really understand this. And it's really cool. And I did, because of that whole circumstance. So I can go on in terms of how this was really magical, but just that main point of developing independence of being and unhooking from the ego and status. This was really profound, and to also understand the detriments of humility. I made every effort all my life to be humble and modest, but also I understand that it can be a false ego, like an inverted ego trap. Like I see it in the Amish. Sorry to be ragging on the Amish. I'm sorry, but that the way they dress, it is, to me, there's a big ego factor involved, because they are saying, look how pious I am. Right? Look how humble I am. I'm wearing this outfit that doesn't make me look good. It's not shiny, it's not flashy and everything. But essentially, you are pushing the fact that you are super pious. Is that not an ego issue? So if you look closely, and I saw it in that community too, people went to great extremes to prove how humble they were, how modest they were, and all of this, how sacrificing they were, at great cost to themselves, but all to the point of showing how pious they were. Still ego. Yeah. It's fascinating. So does that put some spin on at least, I mean, from what I'm sharing, Daniel, I'm sure you understand it, but if from looking at it from an external point of view, does this share a communication of this point of that we're looking to share here, to say, what if you chose the circumstances of your birth? Why? It's the why. Why is there a good reason? So assume there's a good reason and find it. Now, let me go a little bit, but before I go a little bit further, I'm keen to hear any comments on what I was saying there, Daniel.
Yes, I can relate to a lot of things that you just shared with us, Sil, and thank you for
Brilliant.
for your fearlessness, for your courage to share all that. I would like to. I have just one question, additional question. If you feel the need to also share this with me and our audience today.
My life is an open book. I can talk about absolutely everything in my life. Is not a problem. So yeah, no worries.
Yeah, because what I was thinking while you were sharing your story is that we have so many experiences during our childhood, but not all of them make sense as we experience them. So my question to you would be, when exactly did this experience started to make sense to you? And when did you, in the sense that you realized all the lessons from this experience, the benefits from being born in this family, for having this particular father, this particular mother, being born in this particular town, and so on and so forth?
That's a good question. I have to go through it because, at age 10, something happened that just triggered me in a positive way to pay attention to awareness. And from that moment, I really started to focus on learning and growing deliberately. And something happened before that, that made me understand that I needed to have a public self and a private self. And my private self was not secret or hidden. If anybody asked, I would have been happy to share what I'm doing in my private self, what I'm thinking, but nobody ever asked. But nonetheless, this shift between a private and a public self, this was from age 6 that I did this. It's a cool story, but it's kind of long to share. I mean, I'm happy to share it. It would take time. So that differential between the public and the private. In the public self, I subscribed to things that I lived basically like any normal person would do. I didn't stand out. But privately, I wasn't doing any of that. So like later on, okay, at that time in the early school, I lived in 3 different places. A very tiny town, that one I spoke about, then a middle town, medium-sized town, and then I went, basically my last 2 years of school, I went to Beverly Hills 90210, a similar school. So I went from one extreme to the other. It was very cool. So another benefit of that particular family. But this difference between the private self and the public self, that inside my private self, I was focused on learning and growing in my own focus. So I never focused much on the family side. I was always doing my own thing, always. And it's just always doing my own thing. So I never really paid too much attention to the family as an external factor. At least as a child, I'm trying to think when first this, I was sort of pleased to be in that family. All right. Well, I would say indirectly at age 10. Age 10 was a huge year for me. Everything that possibly could have happened in that age 10 year. It was just too incredible. so many incredible things. My parents got divorced during that year. Now, at that time, it's hard to really, sometimes I think for people who didn't experience this, today, divorce, people, well, I got divorced, like, okay, second, third divorce, whatever, we don't think twice about it. Back in those days, you couldn't even use the word divorce in polite company, right? Be whispered or say, oh, they are breaking up and it's going to be. It was a big deal. It was a big stigma, in other words. It was a massive thing, right? It's peculiar to subscribe to or to understand it today because it's so silly. But nonetheless, that was the case. All right. So my parents get divorced. Now, not only do they get divorced, but under a massive scandal. My father's was a big drama in the house. It's a long story to explain, but he was caught with his mistress, and we had a very big house. He had his surgery on one side. It's like a big U-shaped house. So, on the one wing of the house, he had his surgery and he had a private room there. And, my parents were sort of separated and he was staying there, which is separate to the house, right? But it's joined but separate. Anyway, so he's caught by my brother with his mistress. The brother breaks down the door and it's massive drama. Now, of course, eventually the police got called and all sorts of stuff. So, of course, it's all over the town, right? And then my father doesn't let go of his mistress, and his mistress is, to all intents and purposes, a prostitute. Or she's known to be such. Whether she actually was or not, I'm not entirely sure. I did have somebody tell me so. So there's some evidence for this. But anyway, now you can imagine the scandal, right? I mean, doctors are in that town. This was in the middle town. We'd just moved to the middle town. Doctors are still, highly regarded. They're top of the social ladder. So this was the most incredible drama of scandal that, for all I know, they're probably still talking about it. It was a big deal. It was a huge deal. So I remember on the night that the scandal broke, right? So not the scandal, that we all got to be aware of it. So my brother, it's a long story, but anyway. So the end result of this is that I wake up to hear this hysterical screaming from my mother, right? And my first thought was, well, you're really overdoing this, right? I mean, I could hear somebody who is the outrage. It's because of ego, because she kept saying, under my roof, under my roof, under my very own roof. It's like, oh God, this was the end of the world for her. The shame of it, from a, not because she was betrayed in love, no, because she's going to look bad to society. This was her big concern, and big, that was the thing that upset her, right? Her loss of face and loss of standing and all this, right? The embarrassment of it. It's just astonishing to me. Anyway, so she's screaming her head off, and my elder brother, my elder sister, my father, the big drama, the big argument. So my younger sister and I, we get sent to my room. I must now look after her, and we out of the focus there. So as I get to my room, I calm my younger sister down, and I'm like, that's sort of their thing. I'm not particularly upset by it. I'm trying to listen. I'm trying to get my sister to shut up so I can figure out what's going on. But anyway, she has to, be drama. It's like, come on, pay attention here. Time for indulging in your own nonsense. You don't even know what's going on and you're upset. But anyway, so eventually I got her calm down. And by that time, I couldn't hear much what was going on. But still, drama. You could hear there's definitely drama. So I'm not sure exactly what the cause is at that point. But so just as I finished my calming my sister down, I sat myself down on my bed. I remember this very clearly, right? It's a peculiar expression, and I remember doing it, and I remember the thought at the time that I sat myself down. Not I sat down, I sat myself down. There's very particular awareness in that moment. And I sat myself down and I said to myself, this will either make me or break me. And that surprised me. It's like, wow, really? Where did that come from? And then I really thought about it. Like, what does this mean? How am I going to implement this? How am I going to actually apply this? And what does this mean? And I just set the determination right in that spot that I would use this whole drama to make me a better person. I wouldn't allow myself to be teased because of it, or to feel bad because of it, or anything. So this was a massive moment in which I realized that this whole drama, this whole incident, was something that would make me a better person, make me a more sensible person, more independent, etc. So that was, I guess, the start of this appreciation of being in that particular family. But as a specific thing to choose it, this came way later in my life. I'm not sure when exactly I first thought of this specifically as a choice mechanism, but definitely, I guess probably maybe within the last decade or so, I would say, where I specifically thought, what if I chose that deliberately? But other than that, because I was always focused on doing for myself, by myself, always.
Yeah.
I mean, from my earliest memory, I was focused on me doing me. Yeah. So yeah, definitely a much later situation.
Yeah, this would have been my point also, that whenever things are happening, it's not very clear to us that we are the ones making the choice, that we are have chosen our life circumstances or our birth for that matter, right? But it comes actually, it's easier to reflect on this and contemplate on these facts, that we are the ones choosing these circumstances at a later stage in our life. It's easier if we are doing that. So perhaps this could be something very practical for those that are listening to do for themselves. So if they are skeptical about their current life circumstances, perhaps, I don't know, they are facing, I don't know, abuse or poverty or depression, anxiety, and so on and so forth. And when you are in those kind of feelings, caught in those feelings, it's really difficult if someone tells you, yeah, don't worry, you have chosen that. It's difficult for you to to integrate and relate, right, to find the meaning in those words. But a nice practice is to always look back at your past circumstances and try to find the lesson
Yes,
there,
exactly.
right?
Or lessons.
Why?
People.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's more
Yeah,
than
the
one.
lessons, exactly, plural.
Yeah.
Yeah. So well, we are here to learn, right? And
Exactly.
to evolve, to raise our level of consciousness, but only if we get also to it really helps a lot in our growth, in our evolution, in our healing process, to understand and to integrate the lessons. And if that doesn't resonate with you, it's fine, because you can always go back into your past and search consciously, search for the lessons there and see how that makes you feel, right?
Exactly.
How it because when we integrate the lesson, it also dissolves. It has this power of dissolving our hurt, our ego, our negative mental patterns that are keeping us in that particular situation, right? But yeah, you need to experience it for yourself to be able to fully understand it.
Yes. So the value of this, and I make a big point of this. It's one of the biggest points in Way of Impeccable, that we want to set ourselves strategically in our learning, in our awareness, in our lives, in the issue when it comes to whether things are true or not. So I want to get value out of things, whether they're true or not, doesn't matter. So this idea that I chose the circumstances of my birth, it is exceedingly valuable to me. Whether it's true or not, doesn't make any difference. Why? Because it's so easy that I could have complained about that family. Yes. Because I mean, despite my father having money and that, I essentially grew up without money. Yes. And then when my parents got divorced, he was exceedingly stingy with the alimony. And I mean, we lived essentially struggling with money. I mean, I remember doing the shopping. I was telling somebody about this yesterday. I was the only responsible one, by the way. So I ended up doing everything, and doing a lot more than I should have, because, well, my siblings were all messed up by the divorce. And so anyway, so it all fell on me. Anyway, so I go shopping and I had the list and it's all carefully worked out. And whatever was left over that I could spend on cheese. And in those days, they used to have a big bin with offcuts of cheese that were individually priced, right? Specific to the offcut of cheese. I don't know if you remember this or not. I don't see it anymore nowadays, but anyway, back then. So whatever was left over, let's say it was $1.29 that was left over, I would go and look through the whole bin to find a block of cheese that was $1.29. All right. So I used every last cent. Cheese was a big deal, but it was a luxury, a big luxury. My siblings, they just greedily used it too much, and I was always careful to you cut it very thinly. Anyway, so but this cheese thing was a big deal. So just to give an illustration of the focus on the economics of the situation. And I never had, I mean, I was like a ragamuffin in terms of clothes. Again, I always got overlooked and all that. So it was, and then the stress and the drama, and after that the house was, the gutters were falling down. I used candles because the electricity stopped working after a while, stuff like that. So I mean, I could say there was negatives to it also. But I never ever thought of it that way at all. So this makes you shift this idea that you chose it. It makes you re-look at things, and you end up extracting value where you wouldn't otherwise have found value. And that is inordinately important. Inordinately important. It's a huge deal when you can get value where you didn't find value before. And I've seen this with people that have had, I mean, the negatives of my situation are like, they're nothing. I mean, they're not. All right, so you've got to survive a bit of drama. It's not like there was abuse or anything like this. I mean, there's many situations that are like way worse than that. I mean, it's nothing compared to that, right? But even in those situations where, I was just speaking about this fairly recently. Well, sure, she came on we did the Facebook lives with her, so it's not that I'm sharing something that's not out there, public Facebook Lives, where she spoke about sexual abuse with her father, right? When she was a little girl, I mean, from 3 years old, he sexually abused her. And we were speaking about this fairly recently in terms of her looking at this from this perspective, that she chose it and why. Now, I won't go into all the details because it's a long story, but she did succeed in finding a good reason, a bunch of good reasons for it. Not nice reasons, but good reasons, right? And necessary reasons that are personal to her. And this is the key. It's what we need to learn. I needed, for me, I could so easily, because I have a tendency in me to take things to the maximum, to go all the way to the end. So if I had been caught up in ambition, I would have been one of those people who went all the way and went as far as I could have gone. And in my public side, I had a little bit of that, but I grew out of it, just enough to make me realize, nah, this is a waste of time. This is no good. So that kind of fizzled out by the time I left school. It was great. But if I'd not had this in my private side, this understanding that this is a dead end, I could easily be consumed in that life, and I never would have undertaken personal development and understanding things more, and focusing on developing my awareness and my integrity and my sense of being and my independence of being and everything that I absolutely value now. And everything that I see people who are successful when they get to that midlife crisis stage, where they come to realize, oh, all that stuff I thought was so important, status and fame and wealth and all this stuff, it absolutely means nothing, right? And then they end up coming to us, right, Daniela, to restart their actual education, right? They burn out, or they get really depressed, right? Midlife crisis. So, I mean, this is typically our clients, our participants, yes. Because they realize too late what's really important. So for me, those circumstances absolutely really helped me to realize this. It was not the way to go right from the get-go. So I got a jump start, at age 10 on what was really important. And that really helped me tremendously. It was massive. It was massive. I spent every waking moment from age 10 thinking and figuring stuff out and reinventing the wheel, from a psychology or a philosophy point of view, from a spirituality point of view. That was fantastic. It was really beneficial. So I'm very thrilled as a path, it's really excellent.
Yes.
When it comes to money, though, I always had to struggle with money, which, detracted from my spiritual development, but, that's okay. I always made do somehow. I had businesses and stuff. They came, they went, when the lessons were gone, the universe said, okay, next adventure, next thing. So, but yeah, so it's fantastic. It's really magical, really, really magical business. And also I'm just thinking one more point on this, from a point of, we spoke about forgiveness. This concept, which is what made me think of it last week when we were speaking about forgiveness, people who struggle with forgiveness, when it comes to their circumstances, typically forgiving their parents or their siblings or people close to them, right? In their childhood, when they think, I chose that. Oh, that's really, really, and they find the good reason. Boom, that need for forgiveness goes away right away. Very powerful. Very, very, very powerful. Yeah. And then we start to get in, and you go a little deeper into it. How would this work exactly? How does the system work? And what's important? And now you start to develop an understanding of the cycle of life and all of this stuff, and like things I call them, we come back, as far as I'm concerned, just as my own theory. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but as my working theory, we come back because we have soul lessons to learn, not lessons of how to build a bicycle, or how to cook meals or whatever. Not that kind, not skills and how to be a doctor, not that kind of stuff, but stuff that really matters, like this lesson of unhooking from status and ego and ambition, specifically ambition. Yeah, that's a big soul lesson for me that freed me up, because that's something that I could have had that in me, built in, pressed in me for centuries. And I see, for instance, the downsides of something that is a deeply embedded thing in our DNA, which is this idea of male superiority and female non-superiority or secondariness, right? This is a deep thing that's deeply in our soul, in our psychology. I mean, I know many guys that aren't particularly arrogant or superior, that they don't even realize they subscribe to it. They do so inadvertently. They inadvertently and unawarely misogynist. If you tell them, oh, you're misogynist, they say, what? Oh, no, I'm not. But they act that way. They don't even know it. So those two lessons particularly, I see time and again as a reason for choosing a particular circumstance, to break that cycle. In other words, to force, like in women, to force them to be on their own, to force them to be independent, to force them to survive on their own, to force them to choose for themselves. Because if they don't break that cycle, they always end up in this dependency relationships. And so this is a particular thing that I see quite regularly. Really cool, really cool. And it shifts the forgiveness thing, because then if you look at it from this angle, oh, wow, this forced you to be independent, forced you to choose for yourself, forced you to not be dependent. Wow. Now the bad actions that took place that you thought you needed to forgive, now they become a good thing because it broke you out of your cycle. And sometimes if we're stuck in a deep habit, you need some extreme pressure to put you out of it. And that's the thing with these soul lessons that I call them. They need an extreme to break us because your psychology is looping. You need an extreme to pop you out of that. Very powerful. Very, very powerful. Does that make sense, Janela?
Yes, of course it does.
I want to chat more. I want to hear more. So very cool. Very cool. So yeah, if ever you have any questions, I mean, I do want to end now on the time. We did start a little later, so we got a couple more minutes. Please, anybody watching the video later, please feel free to ask. I'm more than happy to talk about anything about my life. People always think I'm secretive about my life. I just don't mention it because it's not relevant, but I'm more than happy to talk about anything. So yeah, I focus on things of points of learning. My personal circumstances are quite irrelevant, don't really matter.
Yeah. Yes. Well, to be honest, I don't know if we were live.
Yeah, I don't know either. It says I'm live on custom live streaming service, but I do have it recorded. So what I'll do right now, and as soon as we're done, I'll convert the video from Zoom, and then I will go and I'll upload it to Facebook. So, all right, brilliant. Yes, Donna.
Or maybe we can discuss it.
Yeah.
I would like to propose an alternative of discussing this topic, maybe when we also have an audience.
Yes, I agree. I do want, so we can maybe go over it again next week and revisit the topic because it's a powerful topic. Yes.
It is. Okay.
Very good.
Great.
So let me end the live stream. And hello, Donna. And before we get going with Donna, hello, Donna, meet Daniela. So
okay, I need to drop. I need to drop off.
Okay.
So enjoy your day. Daniela. Talk to you soon.
Yes.
Bye.
You too. All right. Bye.